Let's check out today's conversation. Mike sits down with agency owner Susan Crandall. Susan shares her entire journey, from the moment her whole world was flipped upside down.
I found out that my husband was having an affair.
To jumping into the job market for the first time as a single mom.
So I got a job, my first job, as a 30-year-old woman.
And the moment she made up her mind to grow beyond her struggles.
I learned something that was one of the most powerful revelations I've had in my life.
All of this coming up next on the Level Up Lifestyle.
All right, well, welcome everyone to the Level Up Lifestyle podcast. I'm your host, Mike Sheets, and we are coming to you from the Globe Life Studios here in McKinney, Texas. With me today, I have a very special guest, Susan Crandall. Susan, you're a successful agency owner with Globe Life Liberty National Division, and you've been with the company for how long?
Just celebrated 10 years.
Just celebrated 10 years, so a full 10 years. Lots of success, yes. And very excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Very excited to be here.
Well, kind of what we like to do here, as the name implies, is just the level up lifestyle. Just talking about kind of all these moments in your life where you leveled up, where you maybe had some challenges or some adversity, and how did you overcome that? How did you get to where you are today, right? Yeah. And, you're just doing a fantastic job. You got a really successful business, multiple locations, and just all this awesome things happening in your life and in your business. But it wasn't just an immediate thing, right? There was a journey.
Yes, there was a journey.
So let's talk about that. Let's unpack it.
All right,
let's dig into it. So where are you from?
I'm from Columbus, Ohio.
Okay.
I was raised by incredible parents. My dad was a small business owner.
Okay. And what kind of business?
He owned a pet store.
Really?
Yes, and I loved it.
Did you try to always go there after hours or after school?
No, all the time. After school, I'd walk over there. I thought it was really cool because I could get the animals out and other kids would be walking around, and then I'd be like, my dad owns this place. That's why I can do this.
So just a whole bunch of puppies and things like that? Or
a lot of reptiles.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'm not scared of snakes and spiders and all of that. Like we've had I've had chinchillas and birds. Like I've owned every animal. So I'm a huge animal lover.
Okay.
And then my mom stayed home with us.
Okay.
My parents did get divorced when I was in 6th grade. And then my brother, he was 7 years older than me, or he still is, but he's 7 years older than me. He stayed with my dad. So it was just me and my mom for a few years until she got remarried. So yeah, I grew up and, had a good childhood, had, loving parents. And, but, when you go through a divorce at 11 years old, it's tough.
It's challenging.
There's definitely, I would say that would be the first big adversity that I faced as a little kid. But
trying to make sense of the whole thing and everything.
Yeah. It was hard. But my mom got remarried and had my little sister.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're 16 years apart.
Wow.
My mom got married at 16 and then had my brother at 17. And then had my sister at 40.
Okay.
So there's a huge age gap between us. But it's like I was so excited when she was born. I got married really young, right out of high school. So my mom moved to North Carolina, and I stayed in Ohio for a few more years after that.
Okay. And so is that how you ended up down in the Carolinas? Was following family down there, or how did you end up?
Yeah. No, we. So when I was 18, I got married. Because I found out I was having a baby. It wasn't quite the plan after high school.
Sure.
But had my son, and I was really excited. I always wanted to be a mom. Getting married that soon was a lot. I mean, we'd only been together 5 months. Got married.
So what were your plans coming out of high school? Were you thinking college, or were you working for a little bit, or what?
Well, I went to a community college for just a very short time and then found out I was having a baby.
Gotcha.
He had a 4-year-old. He was a little older than me, so he was able to, hold the fort down, and I was going to stay home with him.
Okay.
That was the initial plan. And then after I had him, I found out I was pregnant 4 months later.
Okay.
So at 20, I had my second child, Mackenzie. And so they were all born in Ohio. And then we moved to Arizona for a couple of years. Built a house out there in 2003.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was he doing for work as you were moving around? And
he worked from home.
Okay.
He was in the financial business, worked, they had an office there in Arizona. And we could really live wherever. But his boss moved out that way. So we decided to go and kind of get a new start. And we were only out there for a couple years. And that's when the market got crazy. And we found out that the house that we just built 6 months before, a house down the street sold for $100,000 more. Like
Wow.
The market was going crazy. So I was like, we're not that attached, you know? So we decided to head back and, back to the other side of the country, and we could choose wherever we wanted to live. And as a kid, I would go to Lake Marion, and I always loved the Carolinas. I'd go fishing with my dad. And so I was like, I want to be in a lake. I want to be by a lake. I want to be in South Carolina. So we found Lake Murray, and then we decided to move to South Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just kind of like picked the place on the map.
Let's go. Right. Yeah. And so you're in South Carolina, and then kind of what happens? Where does your life take you?
Things changed pretty quickly when I got to South Carolina. Oh gosh, we're about to get into it now.
Yeah,
you guys ready?
right.
Like, this is a lot.
This is life.
So I got to South Carolina, and about 3 months after we were there, just through a series of events, I found out that my husband was having an affair with a girl that was a friend of mine in Arizona.
Oh, wow.
And it was completely devastating. Life was good. When I think about being home with the kids, because I stayed home with the kids. That was what I was going to do. I was living the dream. We built a beautiful home in Arizona. He was making money, and I was taking the kids to school in the morning, and going to Target, and he took care of most of the.
This is kind of for you. This is the life.
This was the dream. This was the dream. Yeah, and so.
Didn't think you'd ever have to do anything else.
Like, I never looked behind him. I never wondered or questioned anything. And so for that to hit me, it was very difficult. And through that, there was some forgiveness, and I really got some counsel and tried to work things out. But just a few years later, some of those things started to resurface again, and it was time to end that. And
that had to be a hard decision when you're.
It was very hard. Yeah.
Kind of, you're changing your life direction.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, if you think about it, I did not go to school. I never worked. And he kind of he wasn't the same person. And he was doing his own thing. And sometimes I would get child support. Sometimes I wouldn't. And I had to find provision for my kids. And so I got a job, my first job, as a 30-year-old woman.
So, I was going to say, how long were you a stay-at-home mom, a homemaker, until you had to enter the job market?
It was 10 years.
10 years.
Yeah, 10 years. So it's all I ever knew. And so I had to, not only did I, my kids were 8, 9, and I still had his daughter with me. She's 14. And they're used to me being home, used to me taking them to school. And so I got a job. Making $13 an hour, working as an assistant to a photographer. And I loved the job. I got to put From God bows on babies, and, it was so sweet. Right. I loved it. I was thankful that even someone hired me, because my resume was the back of a piece of paper. Right. There's nothing there. I'm really good at making peanut butter and jelly and mac and cheese. And sometimes I put my laundry away most days,
I can pack you a lunch.
Yeah, it wasn't very impressive. So, it was a good experience, but it was $13 an hour. It wasn't enough.
It's tough to make ends meet on that.
Yeah, raising 3 kids on $13 an hour is impossible. So,
are you living with family, or you have your own?
I have my own home.
Yeah,
my brother helped me get a house.
Okay.
And he made me pay most of the rent. He took care of some of it because he knew I couldn't do it.
Gotcha. So family's helping you out.
Family's helping me. Yeah, very grateful for that. And so. I then was working, got a job, then I obviously wasn't enough. So I got a second job, and I was waitressing. And that was probably that season of my life when I was working full time. Then I would have to leave and go to another job. And my kids were coming off the bus and coming home alone. What do they call those?
Latchkey kids.
Latchkey kids. Yeah, they're latchkey kids. And that was so hard. The mom guilt that I had,
Sure.
just their needs not being met, and it was very difficult. And then I would clean houses, on the weekends, even if it was an extra $150 a month, at least kept my lights on and gas in my car. But it was the most trying time in my life because my heart was in my home, and I was never there, and I missed my kids, and that's really where. Sometimes you just have to get sick and tired of being sick and tired before you realize. I really was just lost, honestly. I didn't have time to go to school. I didn't have 4 years, 6 years, or 8 years to go to school. I just didn't. I needed direction. So that's when I really got into the place where I like, God, you've got to open something different for me. I need a door to open, and started seeking and looking for opportunity, and started having new conversations with people of like, what can I go do? But I also wanted to live with passion. I'm a very passionate person. So if I don't believe in something, I can't get behind it, and I wanted my life to matter. So it was like, I didn't want to clock in and clock out and just do a job, even if it paid well, because I wanted to, live out my purpose. And I just didn't know what that looked like. And so that was 5 long years.
But, at the start of those 5 years, you made the deliberate choice to change your circumstance. Right? I mean, you made the choice to say, hey, this is going to end.
Yeah.
And I'm going to change everything. Mm-hmm. You're going to need help from your family. You're going to change your kids' lives.
Yeah.
But you made that deliberate choice.
Yeah, I did.
It was that just rooted in, maybe something just inside of you that like, there's got to be more. This is not where I want to be. Or what drove you to make that decision?
It's something they call, like when through counseling, it's called the bottom line. Mm-hmm. You have to have boundaries, and seeing the direction that he was going. And there were some other things going on that I won't share on this podcast, but in his life that I knew was going to lead our family in a bad direction.
Okay.
And I wasn't going to go there. I wasn't going to go there with him. There's some legal things going on. I was like, I've got to protect my kids from this, and whatever it takes. This is just, I deserve more, and my kids deserve more. And so, there was just a time where I was just like, this, enough's enough. And, that grace period was up. I gave it a chance, and I can say that I gave it all that I got. And that was the biggest thing for me. It was like, whenever I was getting counsel through making this decision and moving forward was, I don't want to live with any regret.
Right.
And I knew that I gave it all. Can I say I gave it all that I got? And the answer was yes. And I gave it the time needed. And so, I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I knew that,
something needed to change.
Something needed to change, and I knew that God would take care of us. Yeah. And that was about it. And then it was just, in that point, it was like survival mode.
And you just jumped into the dark.
Yeah. I mean, I use the analogy of the storm Katrina, because when that was happening, that happened around that time. And I felt like that was my life. I was downstairs cooking eggs in the kitchen and making breakfast one day. And then the very next day, I'm on top of a roof of a house.
The
house is flooded, and I'm yelling for help from a helicopter. I mean, it was like, this was my life one day, and this is what it was the next. And now it was time for me to stand up and figure it out.
Wow.
Yeah.
So 5 years, you're kind of finding yourself.
Yeah.
Trying to get your feet back under you.
I mean, I really never really dated that much. So that was weird. As a single mom, I'm like, oh, okay. I had my high school boyfriend and then my kid's father.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
And then now I'm single at 30, years old.
Right.
With kids. And I'm like, how do I get out? Like, how's this happen? Like, how do I move to this next phase of my life? Money was extremely tight, and I was literally living paycheck to paycheck. And when we talk about paycheck to paycheck, if I didn't have, I remember me and my oldest daughter got in a fight over $20, like a fight, like a screaming match, because our phones were going to get cut off. And she was responsible.
$20.
She was responsible for that $20. And like, I look back on that now, and I'll just go spend $20 at Starbucks and don't even think about it. And I'm like, that's how desperate, and like a desperate time. And I'm like, we cannot live like this. Something has got to give. I just really didn't know which direction to go. And I think that, when in my career, and that's one of the most fulfilling things for me, is that when I'm doing interviews and I'm talking with people, is that, this is the opportunity that opened for me that I was able to get out of that. And I meet different people that are in that situation where, I'll meet someone that, has a $100,000 a year job and they still know they're worth more and they've had a great career. And then I'll meet someone and I look in the face of, it's actually just happened this past week, of someone that's driving an Uber right now. And it's like, I'm looking at her and I'm like, I see me in there, 10 years ago. 50, yeah. Oh, 100%. And I'm like, I can teach you a couple things. Like, just let me spend some time with you because I can relate to everything that she's going through right now. Yeah.
So you start looking for a bigger opportunity in your journey.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
So someone that I was dating at the time talked to me about the insurance world. Like, talked to me about selling insurance. Like, this is the thing. And I'm like, well, how long do I have to go to school? Because I'm not a student. Because in high school, I was never been a good student. I copied off my last time I took a test was in my senior year in high school, and I definitely copied off my neighbor. So, like, how long am I have to go to school for this thing? He's like, it's just like a week. You just go study for. Actually, I went to this little insurance school in our area. I sat in the front row. I was like trying to soak all this information that was so boring to me. And I was just like, okay, I can do this. And I passed it with a 71%. You had to get a 70. I got a 71%. And so when I got my license, I got contracted with a company actually out of Texas, and the McKinney, Texas, believe it, out of all places. And
not this company.
Not this company. No, not this company. And they were all over the country, but I didn't have anybody in my area. It was a whole, you had to buy leads and all this stuff. I didn't even have leads to buy, by the way. So I just listened to the words that they said to the people on the leads, and I just went and knocked on doors, like literally knocked on doors at apartment complexes.
Because you didn't have money to pay.
I didn't have money to buy a lead. Yeah. So I literally went up to this apartment complex once, and I just started knocking on every apartment complex door.
Wow.
Yeah. I made up my own little script.
Yeah.
And then I started making some money to where I could buy leads, and then I started going into homes, and I just, it was weekends, evenings. There was the structure of the company. I didn't have any leadership or direction, and it just honestly wasn't a good experience. So I was kind of back to the drawing board. So I was praying, and I was back to that. I'm like, okay, God, I put my hand in that. That's not it. And I was driving down the interstate, and I saw this sign, big sign. So I was looking for signs at this point.
Right.
And this girl on the billboard, do you know how like they stand, with the jacket, like the real estate agents?
Okay.
Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
They have that little jacket on, and they have the little stance, the little headshot.
Were you hurt in a truck accident, truck wreck? Call me.
Yeah. And I was like, and I said something about a real estate agent. I was like, you know what? My mom had her license when she was younger. I was like, I love interior design. I could do that. I love people, and so I was like, this is something I could do. So I was back in school again, to real estate school this time, and got my real estate license, was planning on going that direction. And I made one post. I joke about this often because I went to take my real estate exam only to make this one post on Facebook. God has a funny way of doing things.
Just to make the post that you're taking
Just to make the post.
Right?
No, that I passed.
Okay.
So I was like, Columbia, South Carolina's next realtor. I passed my exam. I had my little headshot. I was so proud. And I got a message in my inbox from a guy that was trying to recruit me to a different insurance company a year before, that I told him I wasn't interested, been there, done that, not interested. He said, congratulations, I saw you got your real estate license. I just opened an office in Columbia. Would you like to come make calls for me once a week while you build your real estate business? The side hustler I was, right? Just trying to make ends meet. I was like, you know what? I'll go in here, make some calls once a week. This may be good. So I came in to the office of a Liberty National office, and that was 10 years ago.
As a caller?
As a caller, yes.
Making how much an hour?
$10 an hour.
Yeah.
$10 an hour is what he's paying.
So $3 an hour less than what you were making before you had gone through.
But I was a real estate agent now, Mike.
Right,
okay, so I was excited. Oh yeah, I just got contracted with Keller Williams. Obviously, I hadn't sold a house yet. But that was the direction I was going. So I came into the office and I sat down with him, and he opened this magazine. Mm-hmm. I sat down with him. He was talking to me. He was like, Susan, you could do so well in this business. He was like, you could make $100,000 a year, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, oh, he said this to me a year ago, Right. And I was like, no, I'm not interested. I was like, I just got my real estate license. Thank you anyway appreciate the compliment. He opened this magazine. He said, "You see this girl right here?" He's like, "I know her. You're better than her." And I was like, oh boy. I was like, this guy's really turning it on. I was like, thanks, but no thanks. Give me my list of people to call and leave me alone. So
I got to make some money. And,
He was like, "You're just as stubborn as you were a year ago when I met you." And I was like, "Yes, sir, I am." And there's a lesson in that because when I look back on that, a lot of times in life, if we have a bad experience, we relate anything that looks like that it's bad.
You just close that door.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like, no, this looks familiar to me and it's something completely different. But because you're so closed-minded, you didn't even get to see the difference. Mm-hmm. And so just because you had a bad, experience in marriage doesn't mean that every guy is bad or doesn't mean that every woman is, bad. But some people are like, "I don't, man, I'm never going to get married again." I've done that. But you're closing yourself off to so much when you do that. But I was doing that. And I came in the office and sat down and started making calls. And I started paying attention to the office. And there was one guy in the office that he was kind of like an odd personality type guy. And wasn't the best looking guy in the office.
Right.
And he made $3,000 that week.
So somebody you wouldn't maybe assumed matches that level of income?
So again, I didn't realize what they were exactly doing. All I knew is that there was good energy in the room. People seemed happy. It was daytime hours. I was like, everything's kind of different here. So I started asking a lot of questions. But that one guy making that $3,000, I'm not going to lie, that really was it. I was like, if this dude can make $3,000 here, I'm like, I don't know exactly what they're doing, but I might be able to figure this out. So I started asking questions. And I found out really quickly that everything that I experienced before with that other insurance company, it was different here. Mm-hmm. And I was open. And so I asked one of the agents if I could go out with him. And I loved what I saw, and the rest is history. That's when I stepped in to the company and said, I've seen enough. I believe in this. I can get convicted about this. This is a big thing about me, is that my convictions run deep, and I knew that this is something that I could feel good about doing every day. And I had the support. I had the leadership around me, people that would be willing to teach me. And that wasn't the case in real estate. Mm-hmm. I was just trying to figure it out. Like I didn't even know where to order business cards before. So I love the mentorship. And so I got started with the company, and he was like, I'm gonna figure this thing out. Yeah. So
where did this kind of other gear in you come from? Because if you think about, maybe a little bit in your story, your high school, and you said you weren't great in school, you're kind of just copy off your neighbor. All right. You're a stay-at-home mom for 10 years, you're a homemaker taking care of a family. And, that has its own challenges, obviously. And that's a very difficult role to fill in a family. And then all of a sudden you're like this, it seems like this other gear clicks for you. Like now you're out working odd jobs, trying to make ends meet, looking at a lot of commission-based positions. Like what turned that, or what pushed you into that next level of thinking and working? And
well, the best thing that's ever happened to me is becoming a mother.
Yeah.
When I love my kids so much, like this is where I might get emotional, but I love my kids so much, and they needed me. They needed me to rise up.
Yeah.
And, I know there's so many stories, like when you go through that kind of hardship where your whole house is flooded, your life is flooded, it paralyzes them. They go into a dark room and just stay there, and then they lose their mom. And I couldn't do that to them. They needed me to be their hero in the story. And I wasn't okay with letting them down. And my relationship with God is very, very dear to me. That was a big time in my life. I was 20 years old. There's a whole story there, but I gave my life to the Lord, and I wasn't raised in the church. I would go once in a while, but I just needed him. After I had both of my kids, I was like, wait a minute, I'm 20 years old. I'm married to a guy I don't really even like. I'm like, I don't want to go this path. And I was really broken, and I just called out. I called out to God, like, I need you to I need you to come rescue me. And there was a work that started inside of me. And I just fell in love with the Lord. And I was just like, I wanted more. Every time I said yes to him, the more and more my life became fulfilled. And he started to mold me. And then I got to be this mother to my kids. And then life hit us. But that core in me was still the same. The mother that came and picked her kids up from the school and, was there cutting, construction paper out and making brownies with them, that I was still that mother. And just because this happened to us didn't take that away. That's who I am. But they just needed me to provide. That's the new side of me that I didn't know how to do, and I had to figure it out. And I would go to, moral, legal, ethical to do whatever I had to do to provide for them. And I remember one time being in a McDonald's drive-thru, and I had a few dollars to my name. And I told my kids that they could both get 2 things off the dollar menu. And I said, I recommend that you just get 2 food items because we have drinks at home. And in our area, there was a McDonald's newly built and a Chick-fil-A right across the street. And I remember looking over there at Chick-fil-A, and at one point in our lives, we could just get whatever we wanted, but we weren't there now. And I was like, I just want to get back over to Chick-fil-A and be able to get them whatever they wanted and milkshakes if they wanted it. I was like, and stopping my gas tank at $10 and having to worry about, going in and paying cash for it. I just want to put the lever down. Like, I just need to get back to, where we are, but it's up to me to make it happen now. And what does that look like? And, I just trusted that God was going to open a door. And, until then, when I was working at the photography studio, I was going to show up the best version of myself. When I was waitressing, I was going to show up the best. And then whatever, and this is where I was not okay. Well, whatever was left of me is what my kids got. And I was like, this is not the order of what I want. I want God first, family second, career third. And right now, this is because I have to work so many hours, I can't keep that order. And so when I started praying in that order, I'm like, God, bring this order back in my life. Then there was just lessons. There were so many lessons to be learned for me to be able to even step in here yet. Because an entrepreneur, I never saw myself as being a business owner, making $100,000 a year, then to make $250,000 a year. That was never I'm going to go climb this ladder and this is what I want. I just wanted to be a great example to my children and to provide for them and love people well. But I've never lost that. That's always been at the core of who I was. It was just pushing off these, dusting the dirt off and keeping going, and just trying to keep myself together during the hardship.
So you felt like, maybe there's just got to be more for you and for your family.
Yeah.
And maybe not sure what it is, but there's something there that is for you that is going to get you to where you want to be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what it was.
So here you are now you're at Globe Life Liberty National.
Right.
In your story. And probably like many people, you didn't go out seeking the insurance industry. It kind of found you. You kind of fell into it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Funny, you're just making some phone calls to make ends meet while you're trying to get your other career going. And then all of a sudden, this is the career you decide that you want to go down the path. So was it all just, from there pretty much a couple more years and you're an agency owner and away you go?
Yeah, no, it wasn't quite like that. Coming here, there's just I've always loved people. So this is one thing that I talk with my team about a lot is that, we have systems in place. We've got the support, we've got the training, we've got videos in the back office and all of that. But I didn't have that when I first came in. But what I did have was a bunch of conviction and belief in what we were doing. I lost my dad with no life insurance. And my children actually lost their dad their senior year in high school. Yeah, they were 2017. Their dad passed and he didn't have any life insurance. And I saw my aunt battle cancer and be out of work. So believing in what I was doing was always there.
Right.
So every time that I would talk with my clients, I spoke from a place of passion and heart, even though I didn't have all the scripts and everything down right. And because of that, doors started to open for me because, I'm compassionate with people and I actually genuinely care. And so because of that, I started to have some success pretty quickly. I did make over $100,000 my first year, which I was so proud of myself.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I made $30,000 the year before that. So to go from $30,000 to $108,000 the next year, That was life-changing.
So how did that feel to you? How did your kids react?
Oh my gosh, they thought we were rich one day. Like, it was so funny because I was
they just woke up and
we're going to
rich.
the mall. You know what I mean?
We're going to Chick-fil-A now.
Yeah,
right?
we're going to Chick-fil-A now, and like they saw me happier. I didn't have to ask my brother for money.
Yeah.
Actually, I had to start paying him back. So he kept a nice log of everything that, so I started paying him back. That felt amazing to be able to pay him back. And, I remember my very first big account that I closed, I made $5,000 a week for 6 weeks straight.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm never doing anything else again. I was like, this is, I figured this out, and, then, after being here and kind of, keep getting my life stable, that's when I realized this is so much bigger. When I came to the first convention, and I got to see everybody getting their awards and everything.
Where was that convention at?
That was in New Orleans.
Okay.
And I saw people getting their awards and stuff. I'm like, wait a minute, this place is so much bigger than what I realized. I was like, I'm just been in my little office in Columbia, South Carolina. I'm like, this is a big company. And I'm like, these are big numbers. And I'm like, what is going on? And really, like, my eyes were open to what the opportunity really was. But it wasn't even the money that like was my motivator. I was like, I want to sit at some of these tables with these people. I want to learn about how they think. And, I started to become a student. Like, I was a student of the business, but, having a business mindset. I mean, to go from being a stay-at-home mom to becoming where I am now as a business owner, influencing a team of people and growth, I had to become a student of life, like of business, but not going to college. So I started to, ask what people are listening to. And I read this book called The Morning Routine. And it studies, 50 people's, it's a very short book, but it's 50 people's morning routine that were successful, whether it be an Olympic athlete or business owner. And I'm like, what are they doing? Like, what are they doing different? I'm like, they're working the same amount of hours, right? This person over here just made $600,000 this year. I'm like, they're working the same hours that I am, the same system that I'm working. What are they doing different with their day? And what are they're offering the same policies. They're offering, the same policies we are. I'm like, there's something different that's going on with them. And I'm going to figure it out. Like, I've got to figure out what they're doing different. And that's when the second year of being here with the company, I stepped up into the management role and I started to mentor people and teach them the things that I'd learned over the last year. And that's something I love about this company is it allows you to organically grow. You just don't go sit in a classroom and for 4 years straight and have this piece of paper and now, you're a business major, right?
Right.
like the things that you're learning on a day-to-day basis, it's preparing you for that next year. And then that year prepares you for the next year. And the more, it's like you have your first kid, right? And you learn a lot from that, right? And then you have your second and third child. And so you're the expert after 3 kids come along. And the things that bothered you the first year with the first little one doesn't bother you anymore. But
I think it's important because at this point, though, when you're first getting started, this is kind of the second time you're taking like a deliberate action. Like, you took the deliberate action to change your entire life and go into this difficult, dark place because you knew that there was something better for you, right? And then now you're here and you're in New Orleans, right? I remember that convention was at the Waldorf, right? It was an awesome hotel. And you're right there in the French Quarter. You could have just enjoyed it and said, hey, you know what? I'm just here to have a good time. I won this trip. Yep. But you're taking a deliberate action to learn from the people that are there and then in your agency. So, how impactful was making the most of those moments in the career in the future for you?
It's been everything. I've always been a person that studies people. I love people. Everyone can teach us something. And successful people have patterns. There's certain things that they're doing different that, and I, again, being that student, I was hungry. I was hungry for change in my life. Sometimes people are desperate and they'll just go do things out of desperation. But I was at a place where, I knew that wherever I was going to go, I never wanted to start over. I didn't have time to start over. I was now 33 years old. I'm planting my feet into a new thing, but if I'm gonna be here, I'm gonna make the best of it. But that version of myself 10 years ago the best version of me was $108,000 and, just kind of keeping the house together, right? And then year 2, the growth that happened from year 1, it just started to compound. And then, I started to study successful people and like how do millionaires think? And, I started listening to different podcasts because I'm a firm believer, and always have been, that what we allow our eyes to see and allow our ears to hear is constantly molding us. There are seeds being sown constantly. And we're not very aware of it. A lot of times the world's throwing a bunch of stuff at us. We'll have conversations with people and, they're just takers, right?
Yeah.
And I just was like, started to be very protective of my space because I didn't want to lose what I was experiencing, but then being more purposeful about getting around the right people to learn from them. And then because I was learning from them and gaining so much, then it made me hungry to teach somebody else. So, this doesn't happen. You don't come here just because there's a good system in place and that you're now successful. I had to train my mind to think different.
So how important is it to be deliberate in what you feed your mind? Because I think you made a great point that a lot of people don't even think about this, and they're just consuming. They're, scrolling through social media. They're watching TikTok. They're, whatever's on TV, and they're not thinking about what's going into their mind.
Right.
So how important is I'm going to be deliberate in what I consume?
Extremely. And, there's something that, because when you're starting to level up and you're having different levels of responsibility and, time management and like protecting that, when you let a few of the wrong people in, you see really quickly why you need to have boundaries.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so it's just life experience. But, there's a practice that I've started, a couple of years ago that I realized like I was starting to get burned out, and this kind of goes back to where your question was when I first started. I was really just trying to learn from people, but we neglect ourselves. We don't set intentions for our day. Like the day just kind of happens to us. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that when I was going through, those 5 years, like I was just trying to keep my head above the water. But instead it was, now that I could breathe a little bit, now it's like, okay, I have this fresh breath. What am I going to do with it? And, spending time and like taking care of myself. When you're working 3 jobs and taking care of 3 kids and you have a dog, bills to pay. I mean, I didn't pay my first bill till I was 30. He took care of all the bills.
Wow.
Like this
How
is
do I even do this?
This
right.
is exactly. Like I was just, really just trying to survive. And, I'd had this breath of hope, and it's like, now I can take care of me again. Now I can take care of I can feed myself. And I think that especially as mothers, that or wives or, just stretching yourself thin in general, that the last person that we take care of is ourselves. And, you'll take 2 hours and golf on a Sunday, and just, whatever. I feel like golf takes like 5 hours, but whatever. Like you go just do 1 or 2 things for yourself. But I made my mind up that I'm going to fill up every morning first before I do anything else. And that was the life changing.
Who you want to be.
Yes, and setting my intentions for the day.
Yeah.
And why I'm doing what I'm doing and who I'm going to go be around and what's the most important thing that what are the most important conversations I have today? What am I doing to, help in this area that I'm weak? What resources am I using? Like I would set my intentions first thing in the morning, drinking water, eating good food, making sure that stuff is prepped, like really just like filling up before pouring out. And making sure that I'm setting first things first every morning so that my day doesn't pass and that I can maximize my time. Because that's the one thing about life is that we only have so much time and we have to be wise with it. And, when you're just surviving, it doesn't matter. Like there's not enough of it ever, right? And when I made that shift where I had some money to like kind of, I'll say this, money solves some problems, but it solves money problems, but it doesn't solve all problems, right? But I could breathe a little bit. I just started to invest in, myself. And we often just neglect ourselves because of responsibilities.
Did you notice, like, when you started to make the choice, again, here we are back to you making a deliberate choice, to live intentionally?
Yeah.
Right. To set your day up the way that you wanted it, to make sure that you consumed what you needed to consume mentally, spiritually, physically in the morning to set the tone for the day.
Yep.
Did you start to see a change in the events that were happening to you?
100%.
And how you perceived them and how they were impacting you?
Yes, 100%. I learned this principle that I definitely want to share, as I was, reflecting on the time that we were going to have together, just like some of those like pivotal moments in my life.
Mm-hmm.
You asked me a question we had talked before about like, what is it in me that made me keep going, right?
Yeah.
Like, how did you just keep going? What was it about you? I learned something that was one of the most powerful revelations I've had in my life. And it was that I'm the decider. I am the decider of how I'm going to handle my emotions, what I'm choosing to do with my time. Like when it really hit me that I get to show up however I want. I get to allow, I heard someone say once that you can only be offended if you allow it.
Yeah.
And when I heard that, I'm like, wait a minute, that's so true.
Yeah.
I only can be offended if I allow it. That's my choice. But I gave so many people so much power for so long. And when I realized that, I was like, okay. And so I listened to this book called The Millionaire Mindset. Because again, I was studying
Sure.
people, right?
Sure.
And he said, you need to show up into every situation you go into and visualize who you want to show up as. Don't take what your last experience was and bring it into your new one. And that goes from meeting to meeting, day to day, like
in
conversation
business,
to
right?
conversation, right? And so one day I was in my car listening to this podcast or listening to this book on audio, and I was having an intense conversation with one of my agents. And it wasn't good. It wasn't going very well. I was kind of heated up. And I was going up to my daughter's house to see her. And she had just moved in with her friends, and she was so excited to show me her house. And I see her in the window, and she's waving. And I'm on fire on the phone.
And you're in this other world, right?
I'm in a whole other world, right?
Yeah.
And I just listened to this until I got off the phone, and I literally was going in from one door to the next. And before I went in, I closed my eyes and thought about who Mackenzie needs me to be right now. And I realized I did that in my past because, I was heartbroken and I was, I was stressed, and, I had to turn that off and go love my kids because they just needed their mom.
Yeah.
And in that moment, as I was, again, it didn't just, last 10 years I got here and everything's good now, I'm an agency owner. It was, I still have to do that in all my relationships, that I had to get off Mackenzie didn't care that what happened on that phone call, but often we take that emotion with us into the next door, and then it affects that relationship, it affects that moment. And I just decided that I'm not going to let anything that's going on in my life affect the value of my life. My life matters too much. My relationships matter too much to me to allow one area of life to rob me from the rest of my life. And again, that goes from business to business. That goes from dealing with one agent to another agent.
Right.
You can apply that to so many things.
I was just going to say, how key is that to overcoming adversity in business, right? When you go and you have something negative happen to you, then you carry that into the next business, and then you lose an opportunity because of what happened in the past.
It's so empowering.
Or just the adversity that you've gone through. I mean, we really haven't gotten into this yet of just your career progression. Even here, you said you had the challenge, your father passed away, the father of your children passed away. You came here to the home office with the intention at one point to be an agency owner, and it didn't work out.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm sure that was a humbling experience, right? And we've talked about it after it. And then you had some challenges with your leadership in the agency that you were in.
Yes.
And kind of through all this adversity, just to be able to not carry that feeling into the next thing, that's got to be big for you, and just big for anyone in general, right?
Yeah. One day I was sitting in my office and I heard just this still quiet voice inside of me. And I was experiencing one of the things, right, that I was going through. And I heard, why do you call bad things bad? It's a bad day. It's a bad experience. It's bad. I'm like, because it doesn't feel good. And he was like, I just heard this voice. And it was, stop calling bad things bad because I work all things together for good. And he's like, there's lessons in all of it. The reason why you call it bad is because it doesn't feel good. And so anytime I start to feel the feeling that's not positive, I always look for the lesson.
Wow.
That's what I choose to do. I'm like, okay, I don't like this feeling. And again, I'm not saying don't ever grieve or don't ever be upset.
Growth doesn't feel good either a lot of times, right?
Oh, no, for sure. But like, I'm not saying there's not a time to grieve. There's not a time to go through things and you have to take your moments. I'm not saying that. And I'm not being insensitive to that. But, when it's all about perspective, I was like, this is a awful feeling. Well, it's because I love this person, right? Like all the love and the good that I have from it. Or this is what happened in this situation. I don't like the outcome of it. This is not good. What am I supposed to learn in this so that I can take it with me? And then if you can look at that, life is so much more enjoyable. And people want to be around people and work with you when you're an enjoyable person to be around. But when you let every little thing pull you out the game, then it's a matter of just a couple days before something else might show up. I'm not just because I'm an agency owner and doing well and growing right now, doesn't mean that there's not a trial right around the corner.
Sure.
I have no idea what's next. I'm sure there's one thing or another coming. It may not be in it right now, but it's a matter of time till we're facing something. And I've just made the decision that I'm going to love people well and I'm going to learn from the things that don't feel good.
I think that perspective is so huge because growth doesn't feel good. Right. People who want to go to the gym and change their, physical being, that is painful.
It
right.
is.
Diet and exercise is not easy. Right. And trying to learn something is not easy. It's painful. Right.
No.
In a
and
way.
You're mad. You're like, I ate a salad.
I don't want to do this.
I ate a salad and water and I ate some fruit for 4 whole days. Like, why am I not at my weight?
Yeah.
Like my goal weight. Well, it's been 4 days.
Right.
Well, I gave it all I had for 4 days. Well, that's not enough time. It's the consistency and showing up. And I use the gym analogy all the time. Whenever you go into a fitness, women can definitely relate with this. When you go to a fitness center for the first time, you're so excited. It's January 1. you got your goals
packed,
out. Yeah,
right?
it's packed. Yeah. Like you got your new clothes. Like I got you want to look good by summer. You got 6 months to really go all in. And then you go into the gym and it's intimidating. Especially if it's your first time in there. You don't know how to use that machine. You're like on your treadmill, trying to look and see how people are moving the weights around. You definitely aren't going over there where the guys are throwing around weights, So you're like, oh, okay, this is a lot. Like this is a lot to take in. But then if you had a personal trainer there with you and showed you around and like walked with you a little bit, then it would be less intimidating. And that's what I talk about with this opportunity is you've got your personal trainer. You've got someone there to help you.
Yeah.
It's less intimidating. But for you to come here, you got to have your form right? You got to show up every day.
Yeah.
And you do not wake up every morning at 6 a.m., 5 a.m. and just feel like going to the gym every day. If you do, you're crazy. Okay. Like it's not fun. Sometimes you don't, and you got to like tell your feelings to line up with your vision. Feelings, you don't get to feel this right now. Like I know you're tired, self. Okay. You're tired. You don't feel like I could have this conversation with me, in 30 seconds and make a decision not to go. Or I can tell those feelings to line up with what way I want to look this summer, and
what do you want more?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, no, I do that. I'm like, I know feelings. You don't feel like it. Oh, well, get over yourself. Like I don't let my feelings rule me anymore. I make a decision and I do it. Not that I never do that, but no one's perfect. We fall into that.
But you have to have that conversation with yourself in that moment when you don't want to do it.
You have to recognize it. There are conversations that we have with ourselves all the time that we either talk ourselves in or talk ourselves out of stuff all the time. And you have to be careful what those conversations sound like. And if it's not lining up with where you want to go, you've got to set those thoughts aside. You
got to win the battle inside.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It really is a battle of the mind. Again, in our business, I don't wake up every, Monday morning, like I'm ready to go inspire the team, I don't have this natural thing, but I go spend time with myself. I go look at my vision board. I go spend time with God. I get my head right. I think about each person in my agency and like what they need from me and how I need to show up and, listen to some music to get myself fired up. Like I set that intentionally, set the tone for myself so that I can show up the best version of myself. And you don't have to be an agency owner to do that. That's whatever that looks like, whether you're a mom, whether you're on a different type of business. You are the decider on who you're going to show up as instead of just listening to that voice, because there is a battle that goes on around us. I think we can all agree that it's easier to do the bad thing than the good thing. It's just what it is, and when you're trying to do good, the temptation comes. There's this thing going around that we can't see that we have to be careful and be watchful of. And, I've had that mindset for a long time. I just, I wasn't going to let anything or anyone. When I came here and I realized and I saw the vision and saw the impact that I can make on people's lives, I'm like, it doesn't matter who's doing what above me, beside me, what everybody else is doing. This is my opportunity, and I'm going to keep going no matter what happens, because I'm here for me and for my kids and for my calling. And if I could have had a million reasons to give excuses on why I could give up or why I'm not successful or how I could be further. And I just decided that I'm just going to figure it out. If I'm not getting what I need, I'm not going to wait on anybody. I'm going to go figure it out. I'm going to make sense of it. And, it was a lot of up and down. I mean, whenever I met with you guys about becoming an agency owner, I thought I was ready.
Yeah.
I did. I really did. I was like, I'm ready to go. I was at this different high. I tapped into this superpower inside of me. Like, I never thought I could make $200,000 a year, and, but there was still some maturing that needed to happen. It was like,
and you didn't know it coming into that first
I had no idea.
encounter.
No, I thought I was ready to go. We call it the big head syndrome in our office. People start having success and they're doing really well and they walk different, they got it all figured out. I'm like, that's cute. That's nice. Go through, a little bit more challenge and a little bit more growth, because those lessons that you're going to be learning over the next 2 years will prepare you for that next role. But until then, you might think you're ready, but there's still some work to be done.
How important is that being patient when you want something to happen? For example, you want to be an agency owner at this moment, and it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. You could have very easily said, well, I don't want to go back and reset. I'm just going to, I guess it's not for me, or, but again, you keep going back to this perspective that you have and how you make things happen. How important is being patient and waiting, through that opportunity and taking those growth moments versus casting blame or, being upset about something?
I wouldn't necessarily use the word patient. I wouldn't say patience has always been my strongest suit. It's where do I need to adjust? Okay. Okay, all right, this isn't here. What do I need to do different? And, going back to that time, what do I need to be more intentional about? What needs to be developed? And just constantly looking at how to improve myself.
But instead of just saying, well, I guess I'm not there and, whatever, it's what can I, so then you're saying, what can I do to get there? Yeah.
Yeah. I wasn't, again, and this is no disrespect to home office or anything, but I'm like, okay, this door didn't open right now and a home office didn't approve it, but that doesn't mean that I can't have it. Some people might look at that as arrogant or stubborn or whatever, but I'm like, no, I know it's right here and I know what I'm capable of. And I know that if I just stay the course, because I wouldn't have been where I was that day when I met you if I just didn't keep staying the course. I'm like, I'm just going to stay the course. I'm just going to show up again. I'm just going to show up again, and I'm just going to show up a better version of myself again next year. And, that it worked out.
Yeah, as hindsight being 2020, right?
Exactly.
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah. But I wouldn't even say that there was just it's really honestly simple. It was, I'm not going to stop. I'm just not going to stop. And it wasn't until I become agency owner, honestly, the thing I love about this business is that you can do very, 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 very well financially and have a great life as an agent. You can equally have a great life as an agency owner. You could come work for a corporate office one day. There's so many different ways that you can live the best version of yourself. I just wanted to be in the center of where God wanted me. Whatever that role looked like. It didn't matter the title. I just wanted to be a vessel, and use my gifts, my God-given gifts to the greatest ability. And it happened to be agency owner at the right time. Yeah. And even as an agency owner the past 5 years, the growth, I feel like I know who I am more than I ever have. And I hope I feel like I can say that 10 times over 5 years from now.
Sure. What's motivating you today as an agency owner?
You know, it's completely different. You know, for a long time it was get the bills paid, you know, help my daughter get married, you know, like help my son get to it through school. You know, it's very much about the kids. Where now, you know, it's about the people. And that's where it's been so fun for me right now. Like, I think that if, you know, so I've seen, you know, people said recently, like, I'm glowing. You know, I'm like, yeah, because I'm doing exactly what my heart's desire was day one. I just happen to have a ton of responsibility outside of work.
Yeah.
That made it less fun because I was so stretched.
Yeah.
Where now, you know, my kids are great. They're doing amazing. I have a new grandbaby, which is like, that's enough to make me glow alone. But now I get to dive in with my people and help them come up higher. And I just get to invest in them. And that's what I've always wanted to do. That's where the most valuable part. That's the fun part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you see little parts of your life in your people? And say,
yeah.
I know where you are and let me help you.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. Yeah. We just promoted a girl in our office to SA on Monday. And she has 2 little kids, was staying home, had a failing online boutique, planning on coming in and just working a couple days a week. She came in her first year. She'll end at $150,000 this year, 28 years old.
It's life-changing.
Brought her husband home from work.
Yeah.
He was working at FedEx. He retired early. He's now home with the kids. And now she's stepping up into management. To watching her like blossom like that and her kind of coming in like, I'm just looking for part-time. You know, we're in this situation. And I was like, just get close with me for a minute.
Yeah.
Like, let me have some conversations with her. We're going to figure this thing out. Yeah. And it's been 1 full year this upcoming month that she's been here, and her life has been completely changed.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, you changed your life with this opportunity. Now you're changing other people's lives. So that's pretty cool.
The best. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for taking the time out to share your story and kind of talk about, you know, everything that's made you who you are, right? Yeah. It's fun to hear it. And I hope that our listeners were able to glean some things out of that. I'm sure that they can use in their life. So one of the traditions that we have.
Oh, goodness.
Oh, yeah. On the Level Up Lifestyle podcast is all of our guests get a bobblehead of themselves.
Oh, we do?
Yeah.
Fun.
So it's pretty cool. Unfortunately, your bobblehead is stuck on a container ship somewhere off the coast of California, I think, right? It's not going to be here for a few more days.
Okay.
Just supply chain issues and all that. So and then we're going to have a screenshot that we'll pull up here real quick. So for the people that are watching
tuning in right now, you're going to see it before I do.
Absolutely. They're going to see it way before you do. I saw the proof. It's a great bobblehead. You know, I don't know if,
like me?
Yeah. Oh, of course. Yeah. I don't know if you ever, one of your goals in life was to have a bobblehead of yourself. But
I can check that off the list.
Yeah. It is a bucket list item for sure. So we'll get you your bobblehead and you can proudly display that in your office.
Can't wait.
As a token of being on the podcast. But kind of just the last question is, you know, if you're to look at yourself back when you were kind of going through what you were going through in kind of those dark moments, what would you tell yourself based on what you know now back then?
You're stronger than you know. You're stronger than you know. Because I didn't know that I would be this woman today.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was capable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, here you are. Right. Yeah. So again, thank you so much. You appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And we will talk to everyone later.
All right.
All right. See you guys.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today. We hope this episode has inspired you on your path to success. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next story. See you soon on the Level Up Lifestyle podcast.